Imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a vast, turbulent ocean, the sky above you a swirling canvas of charcoal and ash. The wind howls not just around your ears but inside your chest, clawing at some deep part of your soul that you barely recognize anymore. The water roils below, relentless waves crashing in endless pursuit, yet no matter how far you swim, how desperately you fight toward the horizon, it seems that the ocean itself is chasing you. But here's the paradox. The ocean is not the enemy and neither are the waves. In fact, the ocean is your own reflection, your own nature. And the chase that exhausts you is not toward love. It is the very act of demanding fulfillment from others that leaves you hollow and gasping for air. Imagine waking up one day, not in a physical sense, but in the marrow of your being, with the unsettling realization that your lifelong quest to be loved, to be seen and held in the arms of another's devotion, has been less a journey toward connection and more a desperate flight from peace. Could it be that the more you run after love, the more it slips through your fingers like grains of wet sand? That the very act of chasing has turned you into a fugitive of yourself, a stranger trapped in a body that vibrates with other people's emotions more than your own? This is the crucible of the empath's paradox. To be an empath is to live with an antenna finely tuned to the frequencies of every joy and sorrow that brush the air, every unspoken grievance, every surge of tenderness. The empath feels profoundly, deeply, often too deeply, and so love, or what feels like love, becomes a magnetic force, a gravitational pull that demands surrender. But what if surrender is not the same as peace? What if the relentless pursuit of connection is actually the very thing that keeps you fragmented, splintered between longing and loss? Ask yourself, when did love stop being a sanctuary and start feeling like a battlefield? When did seeking someone else's acceptance cease to nourish your spirit and begin to erode your sense of self? Why is it that every attempt to grasp love feels, paradoxically, like losing yourself? Is love truly meant to be chased, or is it something that arrives only when we stop running? There is a cruel irony in thinking that peace is found through another's validation. The empath knows this more acutely than most, how it feels to carry the weight of others' expectations, to absorb their pain as if it were your own, to mirror their desires until your own reflection disappears. It is a slow erasure, like ink bleeding off a page. And yet society itself seems to insist on this script: chase, pursue, sacrifice, merge. But what if the script has been wrong all along? Imagine the terrifying possibility that choosing peace means refusing to chase that elusive love. That peace is not the absence of emotion, but a radical, defiant acceptance of your own emotional sovereignty. What would it mean for you, for your identity as an empath, to stop surrendering your boundaries like offerings at the altar of another's needs? Could peace be a state of being that requires no negotiation, no barter, no endless performance? But then, what about the fear that haunts every empath's heart? The fear of loneliness, of being unseen, of fading away in a world that prizes connection above all else. Is peace worth wrestling with that fear? Or does peace demand a courage so fierce that it burns the very bridges you've spent your life trying to build? The questions spiral inward, deeper and darker, yet they pulse with a kind of urgent life. What is love, if not the quiet settling of your own soul? If love is not the frantic pursuit of another's approval, then what is it? And if peace is not the stillness found by losing yourself in someone else, then how do you claim it for your own? At this precipice you stand, caught between the ghost of a relentless chase and the fragile promise of peace. The ocean still thrashes below, the wind still howls, but somewhere inside, a shift begins, a slow dawn glimmering beneath the storm's rage. It is the moment when the empath stops running, not because the ocean is calm, but because the need to outrun it fades into irrelevance. But how does one begin to stop chasing what seems woven into the very fabric of their being? How does an empath redefine love away from the exhaustion of endless giving and toward the radical reclaiming of self? This is not a gentle unraveling. It is a reckoning, a reclamation, a revolution against the tyranny of need disguised as affection. And it begins with a single, defiant act, choosing peace over the chase. What does that choice look like? How does it feel in the gut, in the bones? And what terrain must you navigate to hold onto that peace when the world insists you keep running? The answers wait like shadows in the depths. And to find them, you must first step back from the edge, breathe into the storm, and prepare to confront the deepest paradox of all. That sometimes the truest love is not the one you chase, but the one you finally choose for yourself. Are you ready to stop running, to stop chasing, to begin choosing peace? Because what comes next is not a surrender but a revolution, a transformation that will ripple through every fiber of your empathic soul. Let the tide fall away for a moment. Let the wind quiet, and listen closely. The journey is only just beginning. Imagine the labyrinth within you, ancient and vast, where the echoes of countless voices converge. The voices of ancestors, society, your own psyche. And within this maze lies the core of why chasing love feels like both a sanctified quest and a ceaseless torment. To understand why the empath is condemned to this tireless pursuit, why the heart burns with such relentless hunger, you must first peer into the shadows cast across human existence by the great thinkers who dared to map the terrain between desire and despair. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of archetypes and primal energies that shape our very being beyond surface awareness. Among these archetypes is the eternal seeker, the part of every soul driven to reunite with wholeness. But for the empath, this seeking becomes a double-edged sword, a relentless hunger not just for connection, but for validation that burrows into identity itself. Jung understood that we are drawn to the other because in that reflection, we hope to find our own fragmented self mended. Yet, when that reflection is turbulent or elusive, the seeker is left adrift, grasping at shadows. Why? Because the empath is not merely longing for love. They are grasping for the intangible shards of their own fractured psyche, scattered by years of absorbing the turmoil of others. This hunger is not new. It is an echo of an eternal paradox Friedrich Nietzsche dared to expose, the tension between the will to power and the abyss of loneliness. Nietzsche described the human condition as a dance on the precipice of meaninglessness, where our desires both create and destroy us. For the empath, love is both a lifeline and a noose, an intoxicating affirmation and a suffocating obligation. It is the ultimate will to power, a desperate attempt to assert existence through another's gaze. But Nietzsche warns us that such external validation chains us to a cycle of suffering, for the abyss gazes back, and in that cold reflection, the self dissolves, fragmented and dependent. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his bleak illumination, offered a darker lens on this endless chase. He described human desire as an insatiable will, a blind force that condemns us to perpetual dissatisfaction. Love, in Schopenhauer's view, is not a graceful union but a merciless puppeteer, compelling us to suffer for the fleeting hope of harmony. The empath, captivated by this will, perpetually sacrifices the self in service of others, believing that by extinguishing their own needs, they can still the ceaseless tumult in their heart. Yet, Schopenhauer reminds us, the will can never be fully sated. It demands more and more, and even when it seems satisfied, it merely coils tighter, deeper. It is here that Aldous Huxley's prophecy rings disquietingly true, the idea that modern society, with its cacophony of images and incessant noise, fractures the soul's capacity for true peace. The empath is not only battling inner demons, but is besieged by the external bombardment of a culture that equates love with consumption, possession, and constant stimulation. You have felt this, haven't you? That itch beneath your skin when silence grows too loud, when connection becomes a transaction, and your own depth is swallowed by the surface gloss. Huxley foresaw this mechanization of human experience, how we become strangers to ourselves in the crowd, yearning for love but never quite touching it. Jean-Paul Sartre framed existence as being for others, where identity is entangled in the gaze, approval, or rejection of those around us. For the empath, the gaze is not passive. It is a psychic siphon, draining boundaries, dissolving selfhood. Sartre's insight reveals a cruel twist. In seeking love, you risk losing yourself because your existence becomes dependent on being seen, validated, and needed. Yet, your very being is defined by outside forces, rendering freedom elusive. How can you choose peace when your sense of self is caught in the relentless feedback loop of others, emotions, their pain, their desires? Viktor Frankl, however, offers a sliver of salvation. In the depths of human suffering, he detected a space for meaning, a choice between surrendering to despair and affirming life's purpose. Frankl posited that even in the darkest prisons of the soul, we possess the freedom to choose our attitude, to find meaning beyond the ephemeral chase. Yet for the empath, this choice is a paradox wrapped in pain. How do you reclaim meaning when your identity has been overshadowed by the suffering you carry for others? How do you forge a sanctuary within when the walls themselves are built from borrowed grief? This hidden force, the relentless will, the yearning for wholeness, the corrosive dependency on external validation, and the societal dismantling of inner silence, is neither a mere psychological quirk nor a philosophical curiosity. It is the undercurrent shaping the ceaseless chase. It is the ghost in the empath's machine, a collision of primal need and cultural conditioning that propels you to run, to seek, to lose yourself in love's chase, but never quite find rest. And this tension is not benign. It gnaws at the foundations of identity itself. The empath is caught in an emotional crucible where every act of love given without reciprocity or self-regard hardens into exhaustion and self-erasure. The consequence: a slow erosion of the soul, a silent surrender masked as devotion, a war between the desire to connect and the hunger to survive. The deeper still are the consequences you have yet to face, the fractures that ripple outward, unsettling not just your inner world but your very capacity to love without losing yourself. You stand at a crossroads precariously balanced between the myth of the eternal pursuit and the revelation that love may not be something to chase at all. But before you can choose peace, before the revolution can begin, you must confront this hidden force, the tangled web woven from your biology, your history, your culture, and your soul's deepest wounds. Only then can the empath begin to unravel the bindings of need and glimpse the strange possibility that love might instead be a choice, quiet, sovereign, and fiercely tender. The chase is relentless because it is not just about others. It is about the war within you. And the question lingers, sharper than before. How long will you run before you stop and ask, what if the love I seek is already waiting within? What if the invisible cords that bind you to this relentless chase are not merely personal quirks or unfortunate fate, but something far more insidious, woven deep into the architecture of your very brain and stitched into the fabric of the society you inhabit? You move through your days, riddled with exhaustion and inexplicable longing, never fully understanding how the machinery beneath your conscious will is both complicit and captive in this ceaseless pursuit. To grasp the terrifying quietness of this truth, you must recognize that the invisible forces tightening their grip on you come not only from your soul's wounds, but also from the underlying neurochemical symphony and cultural scripts that have rewritten your understanding of love and peace without your permission. In the shadowy corridors of your mind, the interplay of dopamine and oxytocin sketches a haunted blueprint for desire. These molecules, the silent chemical couriers of pleasure and bonding, are ruthless taskmasters. Dopamine, the architect of anticipation, sparks the thrill of pursuit, the tantalizing promise of connection that quickens your heartbeat and sharpens your focus, only to pull away just as you reach for it, like a mirage always shimmering out of reach. Oxytocin, the so-called cuddle hormone, knits you into attachments, whispering false assurances that closeness equates to security, that more intimacy equals more love. Yet this very system can be twisted into a cruel feedback loop, where moments of closeness are quickly replaced by anxiety, and the absence of reciprocated affection becomes a gnawing emptiness that demands frantic replenishment. You might wonder, what happens when this chemical dance is set against the backdrop of cognitive biases deeply entrenched in your mind? The empath's greatest vulnerability, your extraordinary ability to absorb and mirror other people's emotions, magnifies these biases exponentially. Confirmation bias, that subtle mental trickster, convinces you to see only what reinforces your desperate belief that love is a scarce resource, something to be pursued with unrelenting urgency. You notice every slight, every retreat, every flicker of disinterest and interpret it as proof that you must chase harder, give more, sacrifice endlessly. The availability heuristic pulls the loudest, reminding you vividly of past rejections and heartbreaks, leaving the quieter, gentle moments of genuine care to dissolve into the background noise. Each perceived failure compounds the illusion that peace is found only in the next connection, in the next surrender, in the next act of self-effacement. And yet, even as these mental mechanisms tighten their grip, you're caught within a larger societal script. Culture, with its loud proclamations and subtle insinuations, has rewritten the narrative of love to be a battlefield of relentless pursuit and sacrifice. Stories told since childhood, through films, fairy tales, social media filters, paint love as a prize to be won, a conquest that demands endurance and self-neglect. The empath absorbs this cultural conditioning like a sponge, internalizing the myth that peace belongs only to those who have earned love through unyielding devotion and martyrdom. It becomes almost unimaginable to stand still, to refuse the chase, to prioritize calm over chaos, when the single most valuable social currency is the validation offered by external affection and approval. What's more chilling is that these forces conspire not just within your private experience. They ripple outward, shaping families, communities, entire societies. How many relationships become battlegrounds where exhaustion masquerades as passion? How often do people wear their emotional exhaustion like badges of honor, believing their suffering is proof of how deeply they love? And what toll does this take on the collective psyche? The subtle erosion of trust, the quiet rise of loneliness in crowded rooms, the cynical desperation that so many feel but cannot name. The empath's personal agony is a microcosm of a societal pathology, a viral echo of disconnection disguised as connection. The urgency to escape this invisible trap is more than psychological, it is existential. Your nervous system, designed for survival, is caught in a state of chronic stress masquerading as devotion. Imagine your heart as a prison, constantly racing, never resting, never feeling truly safe. Your body, once a sanctuary, is now a battleground of fight, flight, and freeze responses triggered not by external threats alone, but by the internal war of unmet emotional needs. This biological entrapment hijacks your capacity to make clear choices, to hold boundaries, to even imagine that peace is a legitimate alternative to the chase. This entanglement deepens because the very act of chasing creates its own kind of blindness. The empath is driven by an insatiable hunger, a desperate hope that the next person, the next gesture, the next declaration of love will fill the void. But with every pursuit, sight narrows, focusing only outward, on the lover, the friend, the approval, while the inner landscape becomes a neglected wilderness. And so you run, blinded, chasing shadows of love that carry the scent of peace but never its substance. The paradox tightens. The more you run after love, the more elusive peace becomes. The more you lose yourself in the quest for belonging, the more fragmented your sense of self grows. There is a haunting question that glides just beneath your awareness, an almost inaudible whisper from the depths of your psyche. What if this relentless chase is, in fact, the very thing keeping you from peace? What if the urgency you feel, the gnawing need to pursue, to prove, to sacrifice, is precisely the force that binds you to your suffering? The thought is both exhilarating and terrifying. To step out of the chase is to risk facing the raw, unvarnished truth of your own solitude, the emptiness that the frantic pursuit has hidden from you. But here lies the most dangerous trap. This cultural and neurochemical alliance convinces you that stepping away from the chase is tantamount to giving up, to failure, to loneliness. It demands that you choose between love or peace, as if peace were merely the absence of love, a barren wasteland rather than a fertile ground. So you press on, caught in invisible snares, believing there is no other path. Yet beneath these layers of conditioning and biology, something else stirs, a faint possibility that challenges the very structure of your experience, a subtle shift that does not yet reveal itself fully, but moves like a shadow across the landscape of your heart. This shift beckons you toward a radical reconsideration of what it means to love, to belong, to be at peace. To see love not as an external prize to be hunted, but as a state you can choose from within. Before you can grasp this breakthrough, you must first look deeper at the forces that have shaped you, understand their origins, their power, their quiet tyranny. Only then can the empath begin to untangle the web, to loosen the grip of dopamine and oxytocin, to see through the fog of cognitive biases, and to question the cultural myths that have held you captive. Only then can the possibility of choosing peace, rather than chasing love, shift from a distant dream to a palpable, attainable reality. The question that haunts you now is not whether you will find love, it is whether you will have the courage to find yourself first, because the war isn't out there. It isn't in them. It is inside. And the silence that follows the chase may be the loudest, most profound invitation you have ever faced. What if everything you believed about love was the very thing that blinded you to it? What if the intense longing, the relentless pursuit, the aching need to be seen and held, were not the paths to fulfillment but the barriers? You've been taught that love is something to be chased, earned, won, that it is a reward for your sacrifice, your sensitivity, your endless giving. But what if love is not a trophy to be seized from the outside world, but a landscape to be cultivated from within? What if peace, the elusive, sacred peace you crave, is not the absence of love but its most vital root? This is the paradox that overturns the entire narrative you cling to. To stop chasing love does not mean to stop loving. It means to redefine love, to unshackle yourself from the frantic chase and instead choose peace as the primary compass. It is a radical, almost heretical shift, a revolution of the heart and mind that asks you to invert your assumptions. Imagine a wave breaking not outward toward others, but folding back onto itself, rolling inward instead of outward. This wave is the reorientation of your empathic energy, not as a tool to fix, to heal, to capture, but as a force for self-acknowledgement and presence. To the empath, this may feel like betrayal at first. How can I stop reaching out to those I feel so deeply for? How can I turn away from their suffering without guilt? But here lies the core revelation. The empath's gift is not diminished by choosing peace. It is amplified. This shift starts with a defiant redefinition of boundaries, not as walls that cut you off, but as porous membranes that protect your internal ecosystem. Historically, those who broke free from the cycle of endless emotional chasing were not the ones who hardened their hearts or renounced feeling. They were the ones who learned to cultivate a sanctuary inside themselves first, who understood that the external world does not owe them validation, and that their worth was never contingent on another's recognition. Figures like Rainer Maria Rilke, whose Letters to a Young Poet counseled a turning inward to love oneself so fully that the world could never dislodge that foundation. Or the mystics, Rumi, St. John of the Cross, who wrote about love as a divine silence inside oneself, a flame that burns brightest when not tethered to another's gaze. This reorientation is not sentimental, it is fiercely practical. It demands the courage to sit with your own presence without distraction, to witness your own wounds without flinching, and to allow yourself a fierce generosity that does not depend on reciprocity. Imagine for a moment that your empathic nature, this exquisite sensitivity, is a wild horse that you have been chasing down a cliff's edge, desperate to tame and direct toward others. The radical shift is to stop the chase, to turn the reins inward, and discover that the horse runs wild and free within you, no longer an errand boy for external needs, but a force of nature you can meet on equal footing. In this space, the dopamine spikes that once drove your yearning begin to dissolve. The oxytocin that once bound you to others' approval loosens its grip. You become the architect of your emotional economy rather than a debtor in it. You no longer ask, "Do they love me?" but instead, "Do I live fully in the fullness of my own being?" The difference is seismic. Take the example of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the unspeakable horrors of a concentration camp. His insight was not merely survival, but the discovery that even in the most brutal conditions, one can choose one's attitude, one's inner stance towards suffering and love. He called it the last human freedom, to choose meaning and peace regardless of circumstance. For the empath, this resonates deeply because it reframes love not as an external rescue operation, but as a sovereign act of inner alignment. Frankl's life is a testament to radical agency, not a surrender to despair but a mastery of the self. This reclamation of power begins with small, deliberate acts. You learn to say no without trembling, to recognize the seduction of emotional dependency as a mirage, a desert oasis that vanishes the moment you reach for it. You stop diluting yourself to soothe others. You claim your right to silence, to solitude, to your own rhythms. This is not withdrawal from the world. It is a strategic regrouping, a gathering of strength. What you discover is that peace is not an inert plateau but a vibrant, dynamic state from which genuine love springs forth effortlessly. When your cup is full, the world's suffering does not pull you under. It touches you without capsizing you. You become a beacon, not because you chase others to your flame, but because you burn so consistently and so deeply that your light cannot be ignored. This new way of thinking liberates you from the exhausting illusion that love must be earned, negotiated, or begged for. Instead, it invites you to embody the truth that love is a fundamental state of being accessible at any moment, independent of external validation. It is not a prize, but a birthright. Here lies your revolution, to stop seeing yourself as a desperate seeker and begin to see yourself as a sovereign guardian of your inner peace. To trust that the love you seek has been living inside you all along. To walk away from the cliff's edge where you've been chasing shadows and step into the clearing where peace waits, wild, untamed, and radiant. Will you take that step? Will you dare to unlearn the chase, to dismantle the myths, to forge a new alliance with yourself? Because in that choice lies not only liberation but transformation, an alchemy so profound it will change what love means to you forever. You have walked to the very edge of exhaustion, of yearning, of self-erasure, and the horizon has shifted beneath your feet. What you once believed to be love, that relentless tide pulling you out to sea, was in truth a mirage, a shimmering surface reflecting your own deepest fracture. Now look back. Can you see how the chase itself was a way of not facing the vast, uncharted territory inside you? How the desperate quest for another's validation became a detour around the labyrinth of your own soul? Here is the final revelation. Love is not a pursuit. It is not a currency to be spent or saved. Love is the oxygen flowing through the quiet pulse of your stillness, the gravity that holds worlds without effort. When you stop running, when you lay down the weapons of craving and compulsion, you begin to feel the invisible architecture of existence beneath the chaos, the delicate symmetry of giving and receiving, of holding and being held, not as roles you perform but as states you inhabit. You are not fractured pieces waiting to be glued by another's touch. You are a whole, complex cosmos, swirling with light and shadow in equal measure. To chase love is to deny your own wholeness, to cast yourself into the void between moments. But to choose peace is to root yourself in the fertile soil of your own essence, from which limitless love can grow, not as a desperate spray searching for soil, but as a wild tree, ancient and unshaken by seasons. Imagine the paradox. The very act of not chasing love transforms the landscape of your relationships. They no longer demand your exhaustion. They become invitations to dance in your completeness. The empath who once dissolved into others, pain now radiates a presence so fierce that it does not consume or capitulate but simply is. This presence is magnetic not because it pleads or performs, but because it embodies the profound truth that love begins within and permeates outward without resistance or expectation. This understanding cracks open reality itself. The pain of past longing, the relentless pursuit of connection, the torment of unreciprocated feeling, everything that once seemed like an endless cycle of loss, is suddenly illuminated as a necessary passage, a rite of purification in which you shed the illusion that you are separate, that you must chase love to survive, that your worth is measured by how ferociously you give it away. In this light, the empath's journey is not about finding love out there. It is about remembering love as the fundamental frequency of existence within you. It is a call to awaken from the trance of scarcity, to recognize that the fierce hunger you felt was the hunger for yourself. When that hunger is finally met, it paradoxically dissolves, leaving a vast reservoir, peace that is not complacency, but a vibrant aliveness that pulses beneath every breath. And what of the world outside your inner sanctum? Does choosing peace mean surrender or withdrawal? No. It means becoming an unshakable force amid chaos, a lighthouse that does not blink out because the storm rages but burns steadily, inviting all lost ships to find their way home, not by force but by the warmth of unwavering presence. Herein lies the true power of the empath, not to save, soothe, or fix, but to be a living testament to the possibility of loving without losing oneself. So ask yourself in the quiet moments when no one watches, who have you been chasing? What shadows have you mistaken for light? And if you were to stop, really stop, what might you find not outside but deep in the uncharted caverns of your own being? There is an ancient wisdom murmuring across time, echoing in the pulse of your veins. You have always been enough. All the pain, the longing, the fractures, they are the fire that forges this truth into the steel of your soul. It is not a consolation prize but an invitation to rise, not as a broken lover but as a sovereign guardian of your own peace. The path forward is neither easy nor safe. It asks you to dismantle the familiar myths that have shaped your every relationship, the stories of lack, of sacrifice, of desperate clinging, and to rewrite them in the ink of radical self-acceptance. To walk into the wilderness of your own heart and claim what has always been there, hidden beneath the debris of old wounds and conditioned beliefs. Will you take this journey? Will you stop running, stop chasing, and choose the quiet revolution of peace within? Because when you do, everything changes. The world does not ask you to be less. It beckons you to be more. More whole, more wild, more luminously alive in your own truth. And as your light grows, you will realize something astonishing. That peace was never an endpoint but a living beginning, the sacred ground from which all love flows, unbidden, unforced, infinitely free. The question remains, when the noise fades and the chasing stops, will you dare to meet yourself? To hold the wild, unruly, magnificent being you are, without apology or retreat? Because in that moment, you step into a reality so profound it reshapes everything you thought you knew about love, loss, and what it means to be truly alive. The door is open, the silence is waiting, will you walk through it?